Okay, so we've got this beautiful scenes from Japan, gardens and it's pretty iconic, really, isn't it? All of the blossom and everything. It just gives that beautiful pop of colour. I think we're all waiting for it now. So whichever one you're deciding to do, they're lovely. So I've gone for it is obviously classic kind of a scene with Mount Fuji in. So the biggest thing when we're just to remind ourselves when we're tackling and we're using acrylics is that what we tend to do is we use a layered approach where we look at the very back layer and then we work out and then we add layers on top and work forward. So when we're looking at something like this, pretty much in most landscapes, you find that your sky is the one that is the furthest back. So, so what we're going to be having a look at is probably putting on that sky first. This one, we will end up not putting this branch or anything on at all, and we'll concentrate on putting the breaking it down, getting our sky colours, and then this overlaps, the Mount Fuji overlaps, and then we'll pop these layers on, and then obviously the bottom of the mountain, and then finally the water, and then very last we'll layer over because we can even get those pink blossoms over the top. The reason we do that is so that it looks really natural, because sometimes if you're trying to kind of poke in the blue sky and everything behind it, it can look quite it can look like that's what we've tried to do, really. So we try and layer up how we can. So what I've got is lots of tips about how we can also, within that, if we've got skies and things, how we can soften those skies down as well and make them a little bit kind of hazy. Especially, like, for example, this one is very much like that as well. The garden one is a bit hazy in the back, so you can kind of just use muted colours there in the background. And if you're doing this one, obviously, again, what you're looking at is everything behind. So you're ignoring all of this foliage that comes on over the top, even the stone and everything. And we're looking right back at what comes, and then everything else goes over the top and overlays it. So you'd be looking at the very last things, like putting on this tree, these areas here. Now you could pop the bridge in over the top when you've got some background colour in there, just to kind of place it. So one of the things I do suggest as well, if you're tackling something that's got a lot more going on in it, you can always use, just on your paper, you can just literally draw in a 4/4 grid. That helps just to place things, to decide whereabouts is that bridge coming. That's if you get the quarter in the right place. I've just put mine in the wrong place. But yeah, that's a really, really helpful tip to think about how to do it. So we can do it with that one, do it with any of them. And because these are A size, they'll scale up to any A size paper. So A5, A4, any, even A3 and A1, you can scale that right up, because what you would use is just the quarter, each of those quarters, to kind of, work out, does the bridge cross over to the areas, etc. So that's really helpful. I'm not going to do that with this particular one, because I think we can pretty much see that if we did draw a line across there, that Mount Fuji is pretty much up to the halfway mark here. And also we've got a long kind of, we've not got too much placement of things. It's a little bit more straightforward in terms of what we've got to pop in. There is plenty of detail and things to pop in it, like especially when we get to the top layer. But so that's kind of our first thing. So the first thing I'd be thinking about before we think about any paint, and just as a reminder, is this would be to do this nice and lightly. So when you're doing it, just it's minimal marks. That's I think one of the biggest differences between watercolor as well, especially if you're working more tightly with watercolor. We tend to kind of, if there's quite a lot of complex to it, we do tend to put more drawing in. Obviously, the landscape's slightly different, but just nice and lightly with the pencil, because it can scrub up with some of the lighter colors if you're going to pop this on the mark. So all I'm going to do for the moment is I'm just going to kind of find my halfway mark on here, and almost the Mount Fuji is almost just very slightly over, isn't it, to the right hand side. So I'm going to do mine darkly so you can see it. on the screen. But yeah, you pop the detail on really nice. And when this is really kind of a loose, I'm following kind of the slope down, and I'm looking at this edge here that's kind of is hidden, isn't it, quite well underneath the trees here. I'm just going to look at where that halfway mark is on the edge of my page, and then work out that this is, that's over halfway within this kind of section here. So I'm just going to place that just as a guide there, just so I know how far to come down to, really. I'll just pop this in here. And then this one, same again. I'm just looking at, whereabouts is halfway, about here. This is about here. So it just helps us a little bit. If we've got some, we can use the edges to kind of place things a little bit as well. And then I'm not really going to put the edge of this on, but you could if you want to, if it helps you just to kind of just do a little bit of an idea of where this snow-capped mountain is. But again, it's really limited amount of mark making with acrylic where we can, just because it's more the sections. I will put on whereabouts, how this, just some ideas of sections below here, just so that when I come to paint it, just makes it a little bit easier. So I'm going to look at where the water is. So within this, we're looking at kind of thirds, aren't we, really? The bottom of the mountain here. Maybe the water's slightly less. So I'm just going to give myself a little bit of a mark where that water's edge is there. And then just kind of, just where that colour changes slightly as well. And then we've just got a few basics in place to help us, when we start to pop the details and things in. So I'm not even going to put in this branch because that can go straight across the sky and everything once we've done here. Okay, so that's it. That's it in terms of mark making for this particular one. If you're doing this one, you can use the edge of the page to work out here, how far up your lake comes to, and it's all pretty much within this quarter, which is quite handy. And then you can, work out from the edges as well where these sections are, where the edge of your grass is, etc. And that's quite helpful too. So thinking about the background colours, whichever background colours you've got, what we tend to do, if these colours are fairly muted, and so we tend to use, I'll bring my palette over so it's easy to show, tend to use quite a little bit of white acrylic when we're doing these, because it's quite a pastely painting. Now, this one is probably the one we use slightly less in, because you might use a little bit of a pastel tint in the background by adding white to another colour. But generally, the colours are quite vibrant, so you can use them really with brights as opposed to whites. But particularly where we've got skies like this, we do end up using quite a bit of white to pop on the sky. So if you've not used acrylics before, or you've only done it a couple of times, then something to think about is, I would say if you're doing A4, you want a good kind of 5p blob, really, good blob to start with, and you can always pop more out. Then I'd be thinking about the kinds of blues in this sky, because as I said, we're going to look at the very back layer, which is the sky, and then we will paint over, some of Mount Fuji over the top there. So there's all sorts of blues in your kit, so you may want to try them all actually. So this one is just a very classic ultramarine blue, which is what you find in a lot of sets. You tend to get an ultramarine, which is kind of our sky blue. So they'll all do different things. And don't worry if you've only got one to try, that's absolutely fine. It doesn't really matter. Or you might get in your kit a phthalo blue. Now that's a little bit more turquoisey in effect when we mix it. I'm just going to squeeze a bit more. I tend to not put quite as much out as I do white, although it looks like I have there. It's just a bit runnier, this particular brand. But I always put quite a bit more white out and a smaller amount of the colours that I'm mixing with it. So this is when I'm thinking about just the sky, I'm looking at those kinds of colours, and you can even kind of try the two different ones as well. So really, I would really encourage when we're starting to mix these to have a think about you know, testing them out on on a bit of tester paper, because it really helps before we actually start to apply the paint to the paper. So thinking about brushes, just left one at the side. If you have got a flat brush, then you can give that a go. If not, don't worry, you can use a round brush. But when I tend to pop skies on, I do tend to go in with a flat brush. And if you've got a couple of flat brushes and you're doing the background sky, then and it's an A4 or bigger, you know, go for the biggest one that you've got, because you can blend it, use it quite nicely to blend the colours together to get kind of a blended sky. So I'll just pop those out. I'm going to pop another round brush. When I'm talking about round brushes, it really is just, you know, flat. I've got flat edge, and then the round brushes are just the pointy ones, really. Like this. I will show you a mop brush as well in a little while, but we'll just have a little look at that to start with. So that's it. So if you want to mix up your, I've got just one of these paper palettes because they're really quite helpful to kind of mix colours. And I tend to put my colours around the outside and then bringing them a little bit each in the middle to mix it. And then you've got lots of mixing space, and then you don't kind of, because what people tend to do is like they mix up all of the colour and then say, oh no, I've got loads of wasted paint. So a good way of not wasting your paint actually is just doing that. But you can mix it, you can bring it in with a brush. So if you haven't got if you've not got a palette to do it with, it's fine. Just bring a little bit of that white in, for example, like this. So I'm going to look at this colour of the skies on here, and I'm thinking about, like, sometimes you get that where you get a transition of darker sky and then it gets a bit lighter in places. So you can kind of you can put that effect on. So what I'm doing first of all is I'm having a go at mixing some of the colours. I'll just take that off because I am going to use my my palette knife to do it, just because it's easier for me to demo quickly for you. And then if you start with small amounts, you can work out proportionally what colours you want. And this is really all about the total freedom to explore and just have a little go. So before we even add water or anything, we're just mixing it up and just having a little go and testing it on a bit of paper, on a bit of this. You know, you can test it on a bit of ordinary paper actually, because we're only testing for colour. If you haven't got a spare bit of acrylic paper, it's fine. So I'm kind of looking at that. So it just gives us an idea of the different colours that you get. So that's when I say tint, a tint in when we're using acrylics is anything that is mixed up with white, basically. So I'm just mixing this tint up with white here, and that's ultramarine blue with white. So what I want to do now is to try a little bit of a tint, but with the phthalo blue, or you might have something else. I mean, obviously I'm just saying what you get classically in a kit, but just try them. And really, it's very much about what you, once you're doing these, mixing these colours, what do you really like, you know? And there's nothing to stop you just using one or the other either. You could try and mix in a bit of your other blue with it as well and see what happens. See if you like, you know, see if you like it. Mine this morning was totally different to the pit painting, just because the blue I'd mixed, I was so happy with that I just stuck with it. So I'm just going to giving these a bit of a test. I'm not quite there with my choices. I'm going to keep mixing it. I've just got a little bit of tissue to kind of take off any excess. You can do that, you know, wash your brushes and do the same with your brush, just to get rid of kind of any of the excess. So it doesn't, because with acrylic paint, what it does is it can kind of fill out the bottom of your bristles, and then it gets really heavy and it's a bit more difficult to kind of paint with it. So, you know, keep kind of washing out the bottom from the bottom of the bristles. Right, let's have a little look then. I'm going to go a little bit more turquoisey, I think, with that. Right, I'm looking for the top of my page. What I'm going to do is make sure that when I'm mixing, well, I quite like that colour coming together, is I'm mixing enough, plenty of the paint. When I'm happy with the colour, I'm mixing it a bit more. so that once I start to paint that on in the picture, it's I can have all of those colours ready from the light to the dark, because that's how we can keep blending it and so it doesn't dry out. Now, there's nothing wrong with having lines or like patches in your painting at all. I'm just showing you how to make it smooth if you want to, because it's one of the biggest things people say to me when they're doing it. It's like, oh, I don't like that line there. How do I get rid of it? So I'm just going to show you how to blend in case, that's what you prefer to do. So I've just got this lovely blue. I'm going to use that one because I really like it. So I'm just going to give that just a double test now. This is going to be my top of my painting colour. When you mix the colour you love, because it makes your heart sing. It's lovely. Just think, oh gosh, I love that. So that's a sure sign to use it. So that's my top. I'm going to go a bit lighter in the middle. So let's see. Now there's two ways of doing it. You can just kind of take a bit out of what you've got already and then put more white in it, so that you just transition in the colour to getting lighter, but it's the same colour. That's another way. Or you can choose a totally different, as I said, you can use a totally different blue there. Well, I've got a few colours. I'm just testing these other two. I'm happy with that one. I think I'm going to be happy with that one. This one might be still not quite. You have to put, ultramarine is quite a strong colour, so maybe you just need more white in there. So yeah, this exploring is so important. There's nothing nicer than seeing your own personal art coming out. It's lovely. All right, there we go. So I think I'm going to just test these last two, just up against that. See if I'm happy. The only thing I'm not keen on is that one. So I think I'm going to just leave that one out for now. And I am going to go back to my phthalo blue today. And I want a really even lighter one at the bottom there. So I'm getting all of these ready, because I genuinely want to these ones to blend. So if you've got the, if you're doing the one with the garden, there's all those lovely hazy greens, isn't there, at the back as well? Use quite a lot of white, which is what we do with the tints to kind of lighten them up. Okay, three quite different colours there, but I'm going to go for it with that. So I'm really liking that. So those are my colours I've gone for. Whoops, sorry about them. There we go, that's much lighter. Okay, so when you think you've got them ticked there, now each of the brands can be very different and behave very differently. So I think some will be thicker and harder to apply, some will be creamier, and they might not cover quite as well, so you might need a couple of layers on, and other ones are kind of somewhere in between. And some are creamy and do cover. So it's just really trial and error with the ones that you've got, really, is what I would say. But I think the key to it is I am going to add a little bit of water to each kind of little block. Make sure it does move a little bit. I'm just kind of spraying it on there with a bit of just kind of dabbing it over. Just watercolor. Sorry, just bear with me, Mo. Various waters all around the studio. Just in case that no one gets muddy. There we go. Right. So the reason we've got all those lined up now is that we can put them on quite nice and thickly behind. So yeah, we can pop those in behind. And I'm going to put some water onto my brush, but I'm kind of just scraping off the excess a little bit, just so I've got a little bit. And I'm going to go in with my darkest area now and really load up my brush. So the key is having plenty of paint on the tip. So I really have got quite a lot on there. But what happens when you do that? So I'm just going to go in. Right, I'm going to load up plenty. And the reason for loading plenty up, I have to go under there, is that I can actually blend them in. So I know it's kind of dark at this side. Excuse me, that's my long brush. It's hitting the camera today for some reason. I don't really know what's doing that. And then I'm going to go in with my next lot of paint whilst it's still damp, like that. Now it looks like I've got a big line at the moment. But what we can do, you see, whilst it's damp, is just kind of use the edge of your brush, that flat brush, or the round one, and just blend it as it goes. And you'll see, because we've got plenty of paint on and it's still wet, it will start to kind of blend together. Now again, I'm bringing this colour down a bit here, which is slightly lighter, and I'm doing exactly the same, just kind of backwards and forwards. Now if it still feels really stiff, add more water, because what you don't want is a really uncomfortable experience with it. And it is our background as well, so it doesn't need to be really, really thick. We're not needing to layer anything up, you know, like in a lot of detail. I'm just going to pop a little bit more dark back on that one. So yeah, so we can just you know, put those two layers in, and then I'm going to go in with my final colour. I'm doing the same. Now this looks quite bright, doesn't it, at the moment? But again, I'm just kind of putting it on nice and thickly. I'm going kind of just make sure I go right almost into the edge of that mountain. And then whilst it's still damp, again, I'm just going to use the edge here. Layer in there. And then I'm just taking off the excess off my brush now. And then again, I'm just going to bring that together a little bit. You might need to dampen your brush slightly as well. So we're just working it in, keep working it in, and it will get all soft. You know, you'll soften down that kind of edge, really. Just really nice, isn't it? And we get this lovely transition through the sky. And it's a bit of a knack. I think, you know, just have a really go. Just in what I always think is enjoy the feel of that. Enjoy the feel of the brush. That's the most important thing, really. Just move it and just keep moving it, working it into it backwards and forwards. As I said, if it feels difficult and stiff, add a bit more water so it's moving a bit more fluidly. Now mine's quite small, so I am working at quite a pace, so don't feel you have to work that fast. It's everybody works at their own pace. There's no rushing needed. So it should feel really lovely. You know, you can even pop a few extra bits through there. And again, you know, what you can do is look at your painting and think, do I want to move the colours around a bit? Do I want to add anything anywhere? I'm just bringing it up a bit lighter up a little bit here. Add a little bit more of the other paint. And acrylic is very dependent on the temperature of the room as well. So if it's really warm, then it'll dry much faster. So don't worry about that either. Now, if you've got anything that's really hazy, then what you can actually do, so I'm gonna try and pop in just a little tiny bit of a lighter colour, even lighter than I've gone, just kind of a little bit. I'm going to create a fog. Now, I know this isn't particularly foggy, I know this one is got lots of fog around it, and we'll be doing, using kind of like a little bit of this technique next week. So I thought I'll bring a little bit in this week, where I'm even lighting it up even more. So I'm just going to place a small amount round the bottom of this mountain, just a bit. It looks a little bit, I've got it's quite thick, the paint on there at the moment, so I'm just popping a little bit on there. And then I'm going in with this, a little mop brush, it's called. Well, this is a small size one because I'm working on a really small painting, but it's just got a really fluffy edge, and they're called mop. I know you get these watercolor, but you tend to do washes and things with them. So what we tend to do is keep this brush fairly dry, not too wet at all. And I'm just, whilst it's still, before it dries, I'm just going to kind of just dab the ends down and just move that paint around so it's really soft. It feels like a misty mountain, basically. Have to watch for like the shedding. I know we've had this conversation today, this morning, actually, in art class. Sometimes they do shed a little bit, and then you get these little marks left in it where it comes out. So I've just brought that in just to show you, really, that's something that you can do, which is really nice. They tend to be, the acrylic ones tend to be a little bit heavier than the actual than the watercolor ones, because the watercolor ones I know are for doing big washes and things. So we tend to use it more of as an effects brush in acrylic, to move the paint around. So I have actually just given it a bit of a wash off now, because if it's warm enough, it will dry fast. So, but what I tend to say is, if you're still using it, don't get it really wet, because it just kind of splays out and all of the bits get everywhere. All of the it creates kind of funny shapes on your painting. So there we go. So there we go. So that's kind of where we are, thinking about those skies and everything. And then, we think then about the mountain next, because that now then overlaps the sky. So what we tend to do, whichever section we're working on, and again, it will just be testing some colours, but whatever section we're working on, so we're working on this part of the mountain, then what we tend to do is go for the dark colour first. And then we'll work in those lighter colours over the top. And the reason we do that is that dark colours recede and go backwards, which is great, because it creates a big shadow, or creates the depth and creates the shape of something actually being very deep. So we know that mountain is huge, and we have those dark colours on it. Now, if we put that on last over the top of the other colours we've got, it'll make it all feel like it's going backwards, and we don't want that. We want that snow to come forwards, because it is, it's bright, and we don't want to kind of flatten that. We want that to be light, but then the other to feel like it's got this depth on it. So again, it's just thinking about like the colours that you've got for there. So there's all sorts of alternatives that you can think about. So you could go in with something that's called Payne's Grey, which is like a really dark blue, but it's kind of quite a grayish blue. Or you could have a bit of brown and mix that with a little bit. So I've got a dark brown here, which is burnt umber, which is typically quite a dark brown. There are other different dark browns which will be fine. So it's basically not too warm. If we have a warm, like a red brown, like burnt sienna, let me see where that one is. Let's see what. I don't think this one is called burnt sienna, but it's pretty close. So something like that colour actually will be too warm, and it will make it jump forward, because warm colours with red bases in them appear to come forwards. So we obviously want ours to go backwards. So we tend to often drop blue in the background. So what you could try when you're looking at mixing colours, you could try a bit of brown. That there. Try a bit of brown and a bit of blue. I've just used ultramarine there. but you could use the other one. Okay, and we just try, mix a little bit up, just try it, see if you like that. Let's see. Right, I'm just going to try, see what that looks like on here. Yeah, I quite like that, but maybe what I'd even do is maybe add just a touch of one of these other light blues that I've already used. The reason I'm saying that is it's just creating a bit of a tint with the white, because it's almost, there's a bit of a haze on there, isn't there? And I just can feel like I've got a bit of a bluey haze on there, but it depends on what you can see. So you go entirely with what you can see. I'm just going to take a bit more of the other blue, see what that difference is there. Let's see. Okay, yeah, it just creates different colours, isn't it, really? And then I'm going to look at the Payne's Grey. So again, it's a great chance to get what's in what you've got in the set that you've got there, and just have a play and just see the differences in them. So Payne's Grey on its own, like this one. Payne's Grey on its own. It's a bit more kind of blue based, but again, you could put the tiniest tint. And I'm only saying I'm just going to put a very small amount of something blue and or white in it. Very small. See, that's going to be too light for me, that haziness there. But again, go with what you think, what's your gut feeling. Because some people like really dark, shadowy colours, and other people like lighter ones. And I would say go with what you prefer, definitely. Right, well, I think I'm going to go with this one. Quite happy with that, and then I might just pop in a few extra darker ones around it as well. So yeah, so it's really worth trying and seeing what you've got. Now when you go in with these popping these in, I'm going to switch brushes now, to be fair. I'm going to go in with a round brush, but a big enough one, it so that I can create some of the shape of that mountain. I know you can't, it's still quite hazy, you can't see too much, so I don't want too much difference, but I want to kind of like just get a feel. Sometimes when you start to create that with the texture of the paint, I'm going to just mix up this, just get plenty of this on my brush again. I always have plenty on, and then I'm just going to kind of pull it where these, where it comes up to, and just create some of the shape. And almost I'm using that brush a little bit on its side, like that. And bring it down. And obviously, we can't always see where it comes down to. Just bring it down to where you think you can see it. So what that's doing is it's helping, it helps us to see, where each of these spaces are, where the snow comes up to and where the snow ends. But also it's helping us to create a little bit of a small amount of shape and texture in there without actually doing too much. Now you can just paint it all one colour and then pop a few little bits in. But this is just a way of using your brushes to affect, I'd say, in just a different way. I'm just going to continue to build that up on. I think we'll take a little pause after this and come and check out how everybody's doing. But as I said, I know I work at quite a lick just so that I can get a really good demonstration in for you all. So there's no pressure at all to feel that you need to be working at the same speed at all. And I'm working small, so my paper's really little. Just Just bringing those. And don't worry, if you've not kind of got the exact shape, you can just pop that back in with white over the top. We're just kind of trying to just use this with a bit of texture. And if you've got a creamy-ish acrylic, you can just put that on, just use plenty on your brush and it will just cut, you can just kind of smooth it on. And if not, then that's absolutely fine as well. So we've kind of gone in with this, I'd call it like a darkish mid-tone. I'm going to just show you some other little effects we can add to this as we go without it being, because the thing with it is we do want it to kind of sink back, and at the moment when we're focusing on it, it'll with acrylic, and it's always one of those things I say I remind people about all the time, is that it's always looks unfinished until quite near the end, because we use this layering process. We're building it up and building it up and building it up. It's not like a quick fix by any means. So we have to have a little bit of faith that it's going to work. And it does, honestly, it will be absolutely fine. So within that bit that you've done there, what you can just really look into is really zone into it, really look into the picture and think, are there any other tones that you can see? And I am seeing sort of, it feels a bit more bluish over here. So I'm going to add a little bit of this blue without changing it. I'm going to put light blue on because it might pop forward a bit much, but I'm going to put this bright blue on just as it is, just here, a bit here. And this is where we can create a small amount of, just a small amount of difference and contrast, but a very small amount, so without it popping forward. And if we do go for blue colours anyway with these, if we're topping up with a little bit of blue, it doesn't matter because blue colours also recede. Unless we went in with very light blue, that's a different story. So just making a slight bit of contrast. That contrast always helps really well. And just enjoy it. So if you're finding now, you're getting these lovely, you're really enjoying putting that paint on and the brush strokes. That's the main thing, really. Just enjoying the process of it. Okay. So we can think about popping on, the tip and everything in a mo. What I might do is, because we're near the bottom, the base now, and there's a little bit of colours that come over the top, I might just pop a little bit of that over. So I'm just going to add a bit more blue where I think I want to add it. Now there's nowhere on here where we'd go, oh gosh, that area is so dark. It's quite, it's what I said, it's quite subtle, isn't it? The change there. So you might think, well, some of it's a bit of a haze. So you could just have a touch of a slightly lighter one in if you wanted, just to see what happens. But I'm going to just have a little look at now. It looks a bit odd because we've got this whole bit is just left, so we'll work into that a little bit, because when we start to actually look here at the top, I think one of the things we notice about white is that it's not always white. A lot of that is quite bright, but there's also a few tracks, isn't there, in the snow here that are slightly, maybe a light blue or something. Now, if you want to go into a smaller brush, that's absolutely fine, but I'm just going to experiment with just a bit of a touch of a blue colour. Just try to find the right one. So I'm going to use actually a bit of the colour that I've used before, but I'm going to make it even lighter with a really light tint there. I'm just going to bring that kind of a shadow in, just a little bit. Just so it's quite subtle, that, but we can bring in the other colours as well. There's a few slightly darker ones there, so again, we can go in with a slightly darker area you want to bring in, and by all means go for that. I'm just bringing it down a little bit over the top there, so we've got where the two meet. I've gone in with I've got the same size brush, but I'm just using the tip now as opposed to using the kind of edge of it, just to bring that in, just to get a bit of differentiation here before a bit of contrast, but a small amount. Really subtle. I'm going to just add in some white. So where now it's really bright, you can just go in with straight paint. And again, I tend to use the tip or just go for a smaller brush. And this is where we can really brighten. And you can use it textured as well in a textured way. I'm just going to go down the size brush though, so that's going to be a bit difficult for me to do. So I'm loading it up quite well on the tip. And you can use it, to create the texture as well, with those lines in it and really pull it down. The same with the foliage of when you're building up the foliage from darks to mid to the brights and the lights, and start to kind of create the texture like with the stippling and just see how your brush feels. So yeah, so highlighting really. Just kind of pulling those over. And that's probably it. I'll probably just leave that. We don't need, we could go on and on and on actually with trying to reach perfection or whatever, but just, where you get to a point where you think, actually, that's enough snow is fine. So I'm going to leave that there for a minute and take a pause and see how everybody's getting on with that. Okay, so just have a little look at what's going on at the bottom here. Just scrape, see if I can get this couple of these bristles off. There we go. And just thinking about how to haze this out a little bit and also what colours to pop in. Because again, we just all the way through, we're just exploring all the different colours and what we might, what we could actually pop on. So I'm just thinking, feeling it, I'm actually quite enjoying those browns there. I really like how it kind of matches up a little bit with the branch. So I'm just going to go in and just get some of this, the brown, which is a burnt umber, which is quite a darkish one. But I'm also going to add a little bit of this Payne's grey, just to make it slightly darker. Because what I want to do here, I want to get the bottom half in as well. So I know I've painted over a little bit. I've brought my mountain quite far down, but that's fine because I'm just going to put, just, kind of put that shape back in a bit. So this is kind of down by the water's edge. I've got this here. Now, sometimes when we're doing a water's edge and we're doing, say, the edge of a lake or something like that, sometimes you have or at the edge of the sea, we often have a very straight horizon line. But actually, this is like Japan's really quite refreshing because it's you have all these kind of little, it kind of comes in and out, doesn't it? So there's much more of a bump on the edge of the water where it's built out a little bit further. So you don't need a perfect straight line because actually some areas come out, some areas go in a little bit. So it's quite nice, is that, to see that. So I'm just going to go in with these two dark colours. I'm just going to pop them, and the reason I've gone in dark is I want the darkest shadow in first, and I'll just build up the light colour. So I've got Payne's grey and brown. I don't want to go in really with black, and the reason is it doesn't feel that dark at the moment. And yes, we might have some quite dark buildings in there, which, anything I would say is kind of more man-made, or lady-made, should it be, does actually that's the only time I tend to use black in my paintings anyway. So just because we can flatten things a lot if we're not careful with it. So I'm just going in there and I'm bringing this kind of back to where I think I want to bring it back to over the top, because we can, it's absolutely fine. Those two colours together. There we go. So just kind of getting that line in there. There's just a bit going to see. It might come a bit further around here actually on this edge. Sometimes we can't always tell what's going on, so we just kind of just put our interpretation of what we think is going on there. And then we've got a little bit of haziness there. So this is where I am going to just add, and it kind of transitions down, doesn't it? It's a little bit of a, I don't know if it's a miss is the right way to describe it, but I'm just going to pop in just a little bit of, just a bit of this blue into that colour I've already got here. I'm just going to kind of pop it on just like that. I'm just trying to dropping it on really, because it's almost like the transition from one area to another. So I can see that it looks like it's almost like a little bit of a layer of mist or something like that. So I'm just popping that on now. It looks a bit linear, that's fine. I'm just going to soften it down. Again, you can do that with a brush. I'm just going to soften this edge so it feels a bit softer, whilst it's still damp enough. Now, if it's drying because your room's a bit warm, then you just add a little bit more paint on there and then work into it a bit quicker. So I'm just going to add a bit more because mine has dried. Not necessarily because my room is warm, but I've got a little heater under my legs. Right, there we go. And I'm quite happy with that. I don't want to really put too much more on because I don't want it to take away from this branch up here. So I'm going to leave it at that, but you could add more if you wanted to. It's absolutely fine. And then in there, I'm just going to go in with a smaller round brush, which is like a thin one. What I am doing is just, because I'm going to lighter colours, I'm just going to make sure that all of the dark colours are out of there. So all I want to do is kind of just try and recreate some things that look a little bit like buildings, and it is really a suggestion, I would say. I might bring in a little bit of red, or if you've got pink, you could go straight in with that. Onto my palette. This one's actually not red, it's a slightly more kind of a magenta colour, like a reddy purple. I'm just going to just add a bit of white to that. I'll go into that more in detail when we do the actual blossom. I'm going to make it really light. So what I'm trying to recreate are these colours and shapes down here without actually putting too much detail in, because they're still fairly far away. So I'm just going to create some kind of a angular building here. Like that. And then I'm going to use the same colour and just pop a few here. So we're getting a suggestion. What happens is, it looks really odd to start with, but once you start popping all the bits in place, the eye starts to put those shapes together into a picture and then works it out. So when we're doing it, we're like, oh no, it's not, it just doesn't look finished. And it looks really strange kind of popping all these little marks on here. But actually, once we start building this picture up with a few little angles, a few little edges, our brain works out what's going on just from those little kind of bits and pieces. So I'm going to put a few little bits like that, and I'm just kind of putting dots, squares, a few little rectangular with, not all totally angular. And then I'm going to pop a few blue houses in as well. Use some of these light blues and things that I've already used there. There's one. And as I said, it then starts to our eye starts to think, ah, yes, it's the bottom of the mountain, there's houses, especially when we get this lake in, it will make more sense then. We don't want lots of detail, otherwise it will come forwards. So we're just trying to get that just suggestion that there's this going on and that going on. Like that. There's a couple behind there. I'm not seeing too much. I'm just going to pop in just a few suggestions that there's something there without really showing too much. There we go. And I'm going to stop there because I can always add more in after. I don't want to kind of overdo it. So I'm just going to just stop there. Is there anything else? No, I think I'm happy with that just as it is. So what I'm going to go in now, oh, if you've got something that's a bit, you think, all right, doesn't look any kind of an angle there, then you can just go in with your dark paint and make it a bit more angular, which is the beauty of the acrylics. Okay. And then I'm just going to go in now and think about the colour that I want the lake to be. So you can go with a totally different blue if you want to. And also we'll need some darker, some lighter. Now you can go in just with one colour and then paint the highlights on if you want, or you can blend it like we've been doing. We'll leave that entirely up to you. See what you enjoy. I'm just going to go in. I'm kind of going in with a couple of different colours here actually, just to add a bit of slight difference. I'm using some of these here as opposed to these really light ones there. Might pop a bit of this inside. So again, you can note as well, take note, is one side darker or not? Now it's only a thin bit, so I'm just going to go in and paint that one on. A thin strand, isn't it? So again, it's just deciding which brush is going to be best. Is it one that you've got a bit more control with, or a bigger one? I've kind of gone in with this. I'm going to put some dark into this now. I quite like, this is the thing, I like blended, but I also, and this is on my own work, but I also quite like sometimes the contrast of having a bit of, some of the linear works, more lines and things. So sometimes we just like to try all sorts of things. And so, just give yourself a bit of time to think, and it will eventually become clear what you really like. Let's have a little look. And then it's a bit lighter in the middle here. I'm going to go in and change that and make it much lighter. So you can go do that over the top as well. Water's edge there. Again, we don't even need to worry too much about where that meets, because once half of it's covered down this side, we won't really know. What I am going to do is make sure that I've got this lovely dark at the side here, just because I quite like that dark underneath the very light, the contrast between the very light blossom. No, but then I'm going to go in with this really nice light coloured. I think it's supposed to say it's a tin. There's a tiny bit of blue in it, but not much. And then just highlight, because we always put the highlights on top with acrylics. Just pop in some lines there, but because the underbit's still a bit wet, I can blend it if I want to, or I can just keep it on the top. So it gives you that option to do. I'm just bringing that in there. Whoops. I'll just put a big blob in the middle of the water there. I'm going to just change that now. Just by adding a bit more blue. There we go. So we just got that sense that we're getting the reflection of that snowy top on the water, really. Just with a bit of white there. I'm always really careful how much to actually add on. I don't add on too much, because if we put white everywhere, we won't get the contrast anymore. So I'm just looking at where else I might lighten the water up. Just in spaces with and this isn't white, this is just a bit of a tint with a different blue. There we go. And I'm just going to leave that there again. And then have a little think about what we need next, what's happening next. So this is, I think, the lovely bit when we start to think about foliage. So thinking about the colours of the branches and everything. So if you're doing something like this, where you've got thinner branches, you can go for a really thin brush and just use the tip and kind of, I always hold it really far away when I'm doing that kind of work. And I'll show you some tips for that in a mo. The reason I hold it quite far away when I'm doing it is that you're not actually, it gives you less control over the branches, and actually that is really effective when you're hardly holding it and you're just kind of dabbing it. Excuse me, you can end up with some really nice effects. Whereas the branch, I'll be holding it further because I want to kind of create those. But what I love about these actual branches that are really thick like this is that they still bend and twist, don't they? And I think that word branching out explains it perfectly, where they go they're not perfectly straight at all. But I tend to kind of hold my brush further down just because I want to place it really. Now you can even, if you're feeling I don't want to just go for it, I'm not sure, I'm unsure, then you can always draw that in over the top if you want to. I'm just going to go in, I'm going to mix up blue, this Payne's grey, sorry, with the bluey colour, and the brown, because I'm going to have a really dark colour underneath. But you don't have to do that first. You can do the brown first if you want to. Doesn't really matter. But I'm going to load up plenty. I'm going to have a tiny bit of water. Now we know our sky will be pretty much dry now because we did it a while ago. And all I'm going to do is just look at where it's placed. And I'm going to kind of where are we? We're a bit further up there, aren't we? Just kind of try and twist and get the bottom as well at the same time. Just twist. Play twist. But it's not perfectly straight. It's and we can soften this down with some other colours as well. So we're just looking at how each part of the branch kind of moves. So it kind of goes up and that kind of goes up. So I'm not really worrying about that branch at all, because again, we've got all this other extra work on there will really kind of change it. And then following it along. Following it along. Following it along, and I'm just all the while we're just looking at which way it turns and twists and goes. There really isn't like a specific set way of, because every branch is so different. It's lovely. That's what I really enjoy about all trees. They're just, every time you do one, they're so different. I'm just following that all the way along, really. Just lift that in there, and it kind of like goes into a thin branch at the end. So I'll just take that thinner and bring it over, and then we've got this bit of the branch comes down, doesn't it? And that's lovely because we've got this bit that kind of, again, it's just all gnarly. You can kind of use the tip of your brush, or you can press it down, and we're just like, literally, you're just like wiggling it, just wiggle it down until you're happy with the tip of it. And you can just, use the tip of it, just kind of leave the tip of it there nice and lightly as well. Okay, so that's kind of the thicker bits, isn't it? Well, there might be an extra little bit thick from this one there that's going across behind that one. So then what I would tend to do is I'm just still working on this same branch at the moment because it's not a perfect silhouette. We've got some sun shining this side, haven't we? So we're getting, some of it's a little bit highlighted under the blossom. And we will tend to get this much darker underside here. I know it's very subtle, you can't tell too much, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on the top. I'm going to go in with a slightly lighter brown on the top area just to give it a little bit of a difference. And I'm just kind of working on the top and just bringing them down like rounded. That makes sense. So it's really subtle. I might not pick it up till it's dry on the screen actually, but just where I can see the light coming on, which kind of along the top, and then we've got some lighter bits again. So I'm just going to go in with this. It's kind of a pinkyish colour I've gone in with here, but just small bits. And I put a bit of brown in that as well, a small amount, because it's not perfectly pink. It's just kind of underneath where we're getting a slight reflection underneath the blossom that's coming on top of it. So I'm just popping a few of those on. Maybe I've taken that a little bit too far down, but that's okay, because I'm just going to, whilst it's wet, just blend that back in with the, and then there's a little bit of lightness under here perhaps as well. So I'm just going to dab that on there, that same colour. It's not picking it up on the screen because it's a bit damp, but it will. Bit there. So when you're looking underneath, think, oh yeah, it is a bit lighter there. Oh yeah, it is a bit lighter there. And that's it. That's all I'm doing on there because most of it is actually covered. We've got that going around. So it'll be enough. It'll be enough difference. If there's anything that sticks out underneath, like a little knot or something, you can pop that in with a bit of, a darker colour as well. Like add a bit of blue to your brown, it will darken it naturally. Okay, and that's it really. So what I'm thinking about now is getting on. This is why I'm really washing my brushes, just to make sure that I've not got lots of paint in the bottom, because what it does is it sprays it out. And what you need is a nice point for doing the next bit. Now you can. I'm just using a round, a fine one, and just bring it back to a point so it's not like, make sure there's none trapped in the bottom and if we're pushing it out. Or you can use something called a rigger brush, which is basically a brush like this, but it's really long and thin. And you can pull that down and make the branches. But I just like to, I don't actually ever use a rigger. I tend to use a rigger for doing buildings. But I quite like, I still quite really enjoy just holding this at the end and kind of moving the tip. So what I would be thinking about here is just taking a few of these stems. So I really have got my brush. I mean, this is a very long brush, but I've got, if you've got a shorter brush, that's absolutely fine. Just hold it near the end and see if you're not sure and you don't want to kind of have a go yet, do you want a bit of paper? So I'm literally just using the top tip of my brush here. I'm loading up a tiny bit of the tip, and we put the branches on first, the foliage covers up, and I'm really just kind of, and it's not even like a straight, a fixed line. I tend to kind of just wiggle them together. We won't be able to see underneath too much anyway. See where also, where it comes to. There's a kind of a one that comes over here. And again, it's just broken up. By the time we actually put the blossom on, we won't be able to see the exact shape anyway. So it's the same with the trees. You really want just the main, the main stems you can see, and then because the eye works out an awful lot. What you could do is tie yourself in complete knots trying to get every one, which is why this loose feel works really well. So I'm just going to pop in a few. So I've kind of gone on to Payne's Grey. Now you might end up with a few where you've pressed it down a little bit. It doesn't matter. You tend to get that in them anyway. I'm just bringing that again nice and loose. Now I've kind of gone a bit further. So I'm just holding this brush further away, and it makes you use the tip when you do that as well. If it feels like it's dragging a little bit and it's not moving easily, then add more water, because you do want your branches to move really easily. Bring my palette down a minute, it's going to get me in the way. So yeah, so we've just got some loading it up, so plenty of on. So they might look, they'll look a bit twiggy at times as well. So then don't worry too much. Just it's one of those things that comes over time practicing. Anything we do that's totally new is going to take a bit longer to get like into the flow of actually creating the shape of something. So that kind of bit hangs down a bit. Over this side, and then there's one that comes down here. Now again, there's some that are a bit thicker. There's a bit of a thicker branch there that's kind of twists and turns, doesn't it? A bit thicker. And then we get the thin ones at the end. Thin one. Yeah, keep making sure you've got enough water so it's flowing. That'll make it move. You can still keep the depth of colour by adding more darker colours, but just keep it moving by having enough water that it'll shift. So yeah, so I'm just kind of taking the key ones there. Yeah, some of them have got tiny bits on, but I really will just go really quickly with these, like the ones that are coming off really fast. Another bit coming across here, just thicker. It's lovely, isn't it? When you just see it, it just kind of makes us excited about what's going to happen in another month or so with our blossom. It's just joyous, isn't it, when it starts to come out? But there's so many signs. I mean, tonight it was 5:30 again, almost 5:45 actually when it finally went down, went dark, and the birds were still singing. It was just marvelous. Okay, so that one comes a bit further down. So yeah, so you can see I'm just kind of making a few shapes really with that. There's these ones here, this one over here. Just good because they do naturally move in very different ways. There's another bit there. It's not identical, doesn't have to be. And this is the other thing, nobody really knows what shape that branch was. So it doesn't, you don't have to, and you can leave them off. It's the other thing. You're the artist, you're in charge of deciding exactly what goes on your painting. If you think, oh, I actually don't like all of that on there, or I don't like this middle bit, then leave it out completely, leave it out. This is the difference between our artist impression and exactly a photograph, which is, we want a photograph, we'll buy a photograph, won't we? Or we'll take one. Yeah, that comes across Mount Fuji there. I think I've done it a slightly different place, but again, that's fine. Okay, and I'm going to kind of go with that to start with. I'm not too worried about totally covering everything with every single branch. I think that's where I'm going to leave it. So what we've got now is, you know, it's how do we actually see the blossom? And one of those things, one of those really good things about it is we still need a contrast. So, we need to be able to have a darker, deeper colour and a light colour, or a bright colour and a more muted colour, or, a highlighted colour and a warmer colour. So you need those two things to offset each other. So, I mean, with the pinks, I tend to go like put a darker colour in and then a nice lighter colour in there, and then just in certain tiny bits where there's clearly the light is catching certain bits, just a couple of bits where you've got a light highlight with a little bit of white mixed in as well. On here, it's things like you've got a darker blue and a lighter blue, or you might even have like a yellow in with a green as a pop of colour. With these greens, a really light green and then a yellow underneath or something, because you get those two completely here, bright red with pink. So that's how we see it. If we do it all in one tone, we won't see the thickness and the fullness of the blossom. The fullness comes from having the shadow, and the highlights, the bits that you can see on there. So mixing, that's an interesting one. I think what I'd suggest is we'll have a think, just having a think about the different reds. So thinking about reds, and this is where it's great to explore anyway. With your reds, you might have a warmer red in your kit, like a cadmium red, for example. It's often called. They all have different names, but it's basically one that's got a bit more yellow colour in it. So it's more of an orangey red. Now I'm going to get some more white because I'm going to need to mix that. Now, if you've got a pink in your kit, you can just have a go with that and add a bit more white if you need to or not. If you've got, is this my alizarin crimson? Just trying to see if that's what it's called in this. It looks like it. I'm going to take a guess and say it is. So alizarin crimson is a very much more blue based. It's almost on the edge of the purples, but it is still red. It's more red based than it is a purple. But though, just have an experiment, because this is where you learn a lot about pinks, I think, from trying them out. So if you have got two reds in your kit, just try them. One might be a bit more purpley, like alizarin crimson or scarlet red. One is warmer with that. So if you have got them, give them a try. So mix. They're very strong colours, so I would like to put a little bit of white here, a little bit of white there. I am being careful to make sure that all of the blue is out of the brush now, because we will end up with a grey pink if we put the blue base tones in. So it might be a good time, if you can, to change your water so that you don't get anything in it. In fact, I just will pause for that reason, so that you can just change your water if you need to. Yeah, try some alizarin crimson with white, and then you'll get to varying kind of degrees of strength as well. So like I'm testing that, and I might actually go in with a darker one as well. So I can use one of them as the darker colour in there, and then one of them as a lighter colour. But you need to obviously test them to see if you're happy with it, and then you can compare those colours to, say, a warmer red like cadmium red with a white tint. Now cadmium seems to be quite strong. There we go. Much more. Where you get almost, it's a bit more peachy in tone, isn't it? Very different, those two tones. Blue based pink and a red, like a yellow base pink, you can see how different they are. So I would just say go with which one you prefer, really. But again, you can go, you can mix up plenty. So one of the things I was going to show you, now you can gather about, if you've got some, you can just use the tip of a round brush and kind of like just dab them on, dab plenty on. Or you can try maybe about 4 or 5 earbuds together and kind of hold them together like that. And dip them in your paint. I'm going in with the dark first. You'll need plenty of paint mixed up. I might not have quite enough here, but we'll see. And then start to just kind of dab them around the area. And then you can go in also with your lighter colour as well. It's quite a different way of doing it. I know we use brushes a lot, but I just thought that would be quite nice. What it does is allow you to really work, quite a lot into it as well. So I'm just going to go in. You can also do exactly the same as when you use your brushes and just use the tip, or you can, use like put more on there. Use it, just use the very, very top of it, and you kind of get a different feel totally. So obviously I've got all the effects on there. I'm not gone for one specifically, but yeah, so you can just use, really just use the tip and hardly have any coming over. So that's really light. Now that at the top is really quite a lot, I've got really squashed it down, whereas that it's not. And then just follow. You can get some dark ones in, or and some light ones, then some light ones. It doesn't matter if they get kind of mixed up a little bit because it's a similar tone. And then just pay attention to whereabouts you would like them. Place them. And just play about with that, how much pressure you're putting on and things like that. Because that's the bit that will make it you know, finer, a finer kind of an application, or a more heavy application, really. So we're going in with those different, and this is just the 2 tones, going in with just those 2 tones. You can vary the position of the earbuds as well. But of course, you can do that with the tip of them. You can do that with the tip of your brush as well. You can even pop a few paintbrushes together and try that if you don't have the buds and you want to see what it's like at multi-layering up. I think what you've got to expect is that you're not going to have quite as much control perhaps as if you do it singularly with a brush. Because you're kind of like, oh, right, but what are they doing? They're moving around. But sometimes that's quite nice just to let it go and see what happens. Because we're just experimenting, aren't we? We're not trying to create the most perfect thing ever tonight. We're just enjoying the process and how it all goes on. And just seeing, trying a few new techniques and things like that. But it is actually quite good fun building up those colours. I've got the bottom ones as well. They kind of overlap, don't they? Building it up. It's really quite enjoyable to build up those colours and things we can see. And again, the reason we can see them so well is that there is a darker element and then there's a lighter element in there as well. Some of them may be a bit darker full stop, and some of them may be a bit lighter. So it's just working out, where are the areas. So the other thing I did say that you might want to try is let's just a few of the emojis on while I'm talking at the same time to you. Is finding out where the very lightest ones are. So I'm just, no, I've gone in here with a slight different colour actually. So I've used the other pink in there just for a bit of variation, just to see what happens, because I've not done that one before where I've added the other pink in. It gives a different effect as well, you know, you know, as the paint's kind of running out, doesn't it? So, you know, these are slightly darker over here. You don't really need to overlap any lighter ones there if it's in a darker space. So what you can do then is just find the ones that are very highlighted. So I would look at, you know, which ones are in the light. There's a few over here, and this is where I'd be really selective. So I'm going to go really light with add a bit of kind of a white highlight to some of the pink that I've got. So I'm just kind of basically moving that around or tapping it on here, just so I get a very light pink flush. Now, obviously, the shape's going to change, isn't it, of the? So I'm only going to pop this in certain areas. So I'm looking. So across here feels like there's quite a bit of light there. But it's where you can see it. But if we put it everywhere, then it's not going to pop. So I always say, just because it's tempting to go, oh, there's light, there's light, there's light, there's light. If we do it everywhere, we won't get that contrast. And it's the contrast that makes it really sing, you know, it's creating this real 3D effect now, is that? Because we're only just popping it in a few select places. There's a bit down there. That makes sense. A little bit on there. Just a tad here. Usually, to be fair, usually the highlights are on the edges of the, you know, the ends of the branches where where they catch the light there. This is quite dark over here, so it's only these. Few of these. And then it's knowing where to stop, isn't it? Because it's like, you know, you could actually go on tap, 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 tap. So that's part of the process, is going, okay, right, I'm just going to pause that, and this is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm just going to pop this one little bit down here. And if you get a big blob and you think, oh no, it feels like I've got a big blob, just thin it out. Just pat it out a little bit. Okay. And vice versa, if you've lost the shape because you've maybe got too many in, just go back into your darker colour and just soften that down a little bit again. And that just takes that shape right back down again, because it's, you know, you've got the differentiation. It might be as well when you're doing it, you think, oh, actually, I can really see where there's a darker bit of blossom, and that's pretty much it, really. That's all I would really do. I think it would be really nice if you can look at your work from a little distance, because we've got a lot of texture in here as well. And when you've got texture, you need like a meter or a couple of meters between you and your works. If you get a little minute to, you know, take a step back and then see and have a little look and just admire what you've done, because I think you'll find with that distance as well, you'll be really pleased with what you've done. If you've got like a windowsill, leave it overnight, or a desk or somewhere, or a shelf, leave it propped up overnight and come and look at it again in the morning, because that makes such a difference. So I hope that's been really, really helpful. And yes, that's the final pause for tonight.